Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Pork Academy session on carbon markets, CSAs, ROI, and more. My name is Beth Stevermer. I am a 2025 JD candidate at Drake University Law School, and I am thankful and honored to have been chosen as a 2023 Real Pork Scholar and be with you here today. One of the most impactful things I've taken throughout my first year of being a Real Pork Scholar has been through our communications training. It's the importance of building trust before you start those conversations with people outside our industry. That really allows you to connect with them and just better tell our story and listen to their concerns as well. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I encourage you to scan the QR code shown on the screen and subscribe to news from the Pork Checkoff. It is my pleasure to introduce our session moderator, Jill Brokaw. Jill is the Sustainability Coordinator at National Pork Board. She is a third-generation pig farmer and grew up on her family farm in Joy, Illinois. Over the years, she has had many industry experiences, including working with her family's farrow to finish swine operation, management of their feeding and nutrition system, as well as row crop farming. Please give a warm welcome to Jill.
Everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. So I would like to take a moment before we do anything else to recognize the antitrust statement that we share at the beginning of every Pork Academy session. So if you could just take a couple of moments to review that for me, please. All right. Thank you so much, Beth. I really appreciate it. So, the industry needs strong leaders like Beth as good advocates for us. And, shameless plug, I have known Beth's parents for several years, and to have Beth as the person to introduce me today and be part of this sustainability discussion is a really big deal because her parents have both been champions for the industry in the realm of sustainability, and Beth is the perfect choice to lead this session today and carry on that torch. So very proud of her and happy to have her with us. So could we all just show Beth a quick sign of thank you, please? All right, so it's been more than a year since the USDA announced millions of dollars for climate-smart grants. Opportunities for farmers to receive assistance and credit for their on-farm practices continues to grow and evolve. This afternoon, we're going to hear from the latest information and funding opportunities related to sustainability. So we really will cover everything from carbon markets, climate-smart agriculture, and return on investment. We do have a special guest in the room today. It is our acting national program officer at the USDA, Mustafa Abouali, and he is our partner in the Climate Smart Grants. So he has helped us navigate this road and kind of pave the way. Can you give a quick hi? Thank you. All right. So now to our panel. We have got a great panel for you here today. Our first guest is Dr. Sarah Crawford, and she is the Senior Vice President of Eocene Environmental Group. Then we have David Miller. He's the Chief Economist at Decision Innovation Solutions, who will be talking more about the overarching carbon markets. And then Courtney Nix, who is the Working Lands Coordinator for Ducks Unlimited, which is one of our grant partners who we work closely with on the day-to-day. All right, so could we please start? Sarah, I would love if you could start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then a little bit about your company.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. This is a great crew here for towards the end of the second day, so excited to have you all here. As was mentioned, my name is Sarah Crawford. I have been at Eocene for 2 years. Before this, I was actually a National Pork Board employee for a bit over 6 years, so happy to be back with everybody. But I'm from Ohio, raised around farming, raised pigs, understand all of that, and have worked in agriculture throughout the supply chain. So it's great to be able to be in this role and put all of those experiences together. So working for companies like Mars Incorporated or the OSI Group, who makes things for McDonald's and others, and really figure out how can we take investment that's further down the supply chain and get it back to the farmers, or governmental investment and get it back to the farmers so that you can realize that benefit. So that was a quick introduction for me. I live in Northwest Indiana, and as far as our company, EOC Environmental Group, we were founded in 2008. We've been around. We're based here in West Des Moines, so not too far from where we sit right now. And we help with anything sustainability related and really anywhere in the supply chain. We work with 50 different crops, so row crops, specialty crops, all the major livestock species as well, and then into packing and processing, further processing, and really kind of anything that's needed. So really excited to be a partner on this grant with everybody and continue to help pork producers. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, David, would you like to go ahead and give an intro and talk to us about what you do and your company, please?
Sure. David Miller, consulting chief economist with Decision Innovation Solutions. Background, grew up in Northwest Indiana, dairy and hog farm. Moved a whole farming operation to north central Missouri in the late 70s, raised hogs there. Went back to school, got some education, a couple degrees, and spent about 30 years as an economist with either the American Farm Bureau or Iowa Farm Bureau. Was the director of research and commodity services for Iowa Farm Bureau. Retired in 2019 for 2 hours. And started in with Decision Innovation Solutions. Retired on a Friday, and at 10 a.m. on Monday morning, I was back at work. So I currently farm about 1,000 acres in south central Iowa. Have been doing that for a number of years. You know, you got to have something to do nights and weekends. And with Decision Innovation Solutions, we're a consulting company that works about 80% of our projects that we do are in agriculture. We do a lot of economic analysis, either market analytics, economic contribution type studies. We've done work for a number of the pork organizations. We're currently working on projects right now for Iowa pork, Oklahoma pork, Illinois pork. A number of groups. We've done projects, I think, for almost all the Midwestern pork groups, looking at how the pork industry contributes to the economy, those kind of things. We've done analyses for the National Pork Board in the past. When some of the COVID hit, we did some analyses on the impacts of packer shutdowns and slowdowns and those kind of things. So a lot of analytics, with a lot of it in the agricultural world. Doing more in the carbon world today, looking at projects on particularly carbon intensity scores and how they affect agriculture, and we can talk more about that in a little bit.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, David. And then last but not least, Courtney Nix, could you introduce yourself and talk about your role with Ducks Unlimited?
Sure, yeah. I am Courtney Nix. I'm a working lands coordinator for Ducks Unlimited. I have a team of biologists that work in Missouri, Iowa, and Minnesota, and we are helping to deliver the Climate Smart Commodity Grant and working with IDOLs and other programs going on. A little bit of background about me. I've been in private lands for the last 10 years, working with private landowners to deliver USDA programs, have a lot of experience with different practices, and wildlife conservation kind of comes first in my neck of the woods, and kind of branched out into the ag world and working with a lot of commodity folks that are trying to, get a profit while being sustainable, and really focusing on pushing the needle forward. As far as Ducks Unlimited goes, we have primarily, like, our traditional work has been in wetland conservation and really working on public lands. And within the last, I'd say, 10 years or so, we've been focusing on driving that needle in the working lands side of things and gaining partnerships and really figuring out how to take a holistic approach in our conservation. And we're working with great partners and really excited for the opportunity to be here and talk about wetland conservation and how that ties into the pork industry and all those types of things. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Courtney. So, why are we all in here today? Because I feel like farmers across the industry are trying to figure this all out, right? So the great part about that is that Pork Checkoff has funded the Pork Cares Farm Impact Report. So the reporting opportunity for you to gain access to some of these grant programmings that we'll talk about today. So I'm really excited today to share a little bit more about that later, but then also really get a holistic view of what this looks like. So first, I'd like to start off with David and just, let you kind of give a recap of your journey through working with agriculture and through the carbon markets. I know that you've done a lot of work in a lot of different fields of that, and I'm interested to hear how you think that intersects with the pork industry.
Yeah, thank you. Start off with just a little bit of overview and a brief history, if you will, of where some of the carbon and climate activities in agriculture have come from. When I was with Iowa Farm Bureau, we started in 2002 working with Chicago Climate Exchange, and we became one of the founding aggregators under the Chicago Climate Exchange, their carbon credit program, a voluntary carbon program. The two big ag aggregators under that program were us and Iowa Farm Bureau and North Dakota Farmers Union. And between the two of us, we ended up with about 15 million acres in the U.S. enrolled in our programs. We had soil programs for both no-till and continuous no-till, commitment to 10 years of continuous no-till. We had programs for conversion of ag land to grass for carbon sequestration. We had programs for forestry, afforestation, renovation of forestry, sustainable forestry. And then we also had programs that we ran on methane destruction. Most of our enrollees were dairies that had methane digesters. There's a few methane digesters in Iowa, but more of the methane digesters were in dairy than they were in pork. But we did have enrollees on methane digesters. That program went along. We were dealing with a carbon price when it began at about 50 cents a ton for carbon equivalent, CO2 equivalent. At the peak, it got up to about $7 a ton, with the expectation that there would be a national carbon program of some type, and ag would participate in it. Waxman-Markey failed in the Senate by a couple votes in 2009, and that basically set the demise of the carbon program for almost a decade. The carbon programs basically almost became non-existent. The market on CCX crashed from $7 down to about 10 cents a ton. In fact, I think we still have 6 million credits that were never marketed. It cost more to market them than it was, so they're just sitting there. But we did make some pretty good payouts to producers when we were doing that program, and it was a very good learning experience, and I think it set the stage for a lot of things. Carbon markets kind of fluttered around is the word I would use in the voluntary markets, mostly project-based, through the decade of the 2010s, 2010 to 20. And then they started to revive 2019-20. You started seeing some ag carbon programs beginning to come on. Most of them are focused on soil sequestration, and reductions of carbon, some through nitrification, but mostly those. but they've still been voluntary programs, and there's a lot of issues with how do you, the issues in agriculture still surround permanence and additionality. If you've done something before, but you don't do it all the time, is doing it again additional? Well, maybe, maybe not. Depends on the program. The issues around permanence are huge for soil carbon. Permanence means permanent. And to be honest, there's nothing permanent about ag. It is always in a flux and in some level of transition. And so that's become problematic for ag-based soil carbons. Now, methane doesn't have that problem. You destroy a ton of methane and it's destroyed. It's permanent. Nitrous oxide avoidance is permanent. Those types of things are permanent. But then when we come along, there was the climate smart ag was first defined in 2010 in a report by the Food and Ag Organization, FAO of the United Nations. But climate smart ag, as developed by USDA, really began in 2021, 22, with funding really coming on in 22. And it's in three primary areas. One is increased productivity, sustainability, intensification of agriculture. Second is enhanced resilience. And the third is reduced emissions. And it's worth noting that climate smart ag does not define any new farming practices. That's not what it's about. In fact, it includes many of the practices farmers already use. And one of the, I think, good things about how the Climate Smart Ag program has been developed is that it hasn't been hung up on additionality. I think it respects the additionality, but it doesn't require it. It respects the idea that first movers are needed in an industry to be examples to everybody else to follow. And you can't penalize those first movers and get a program off the ground. You have got to recognize them. And then when we look at programs that are coming along, to me, one of the big changes that's come along is the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 included a Section 45Z tax credits. And you say, well, what's that? Well, 45Z is the game changer relative to carbon and climate. Because 45Z, right now it's limited to transportation fuels, which is defined as fuels used in highway vehicles or aviation. Those are the fuels. But it provides a tax credit based on the carbon intensity of the fuel, as opposed to pure sequestration. Almost all your carbon credit programs are to a large degree based on how do you sequester the carbon. Where carbon intensity looks at what is the carbon content or the carbon intensity of the current product that you're consuming. The great news about carbon intensity is almost every product can get a carbon intensity score. Using the fuels, we think about ethanol. Typical Iowa ethanol has a carbon intensity score of around 55. Gasoline has a carbon intensity score of about 98. So ethanol is about 50, about a 45% reduction in carbon intensity compared to gasoline. Aviation fuel, there's a big thing going on with that. And aviation fuels at a carbon intensity of around 90, 89, I think exactly. But and so the way these programs work, 45Z incentivizes having fuels that have a carbon intensity score 50% or more lower than the base fuel you're replacing. So for sustainable aviation fuel, you need to have a score under 45. For ethanol, you're going to need a score under 50. And then there's the way the current thing's set up. There's a tax credit based upon, for ethanol, it's roughly 2 cents per gallon for every point that you're under that 50 score. Well, carbon sequestration plays a part in it, because for ethanol, if you sequester the CO2 that comes off making ethanol, you reduce the carbon score of that ethanol by roughly 30 points. It's actually 33, but it takes about 3 points of energy to sequester the carbon. So you get about a 30-point reduction. Well, that is worth about 48 cents a gallon on ethanol for the typical Iowa ethanol producer. 100 million gallon plant, that's $48 million a year. That's not small change. And you think about it, that's 48 cents a gallon. Now, there's costs to get there, but you take 48 cents a gallon, you get 3 gallons of ethanol, roughly, 2.9 something, but 3 gallons of ethanol for head math per bushel of corn. I'm going to round it to 50 cents because I can multiply 50 times 3 easily. That's $1.50 a bushel is what it's worth if it were all coming from the corn side. Well, corn has a CI score. Corn has a CI score. In the California market, we have a national CI score that's 29.1. We've done some work with Iowa corn growers. The CI score of Iowa corn is probably about 25.5 right now if you ran the current CI score for Iowa corn. So it's better than the national average. But there's things we can do at the farm to lower those CI scores. I'll talk more about it in a little bit, but part of what I want to lay out is that CI score can apply to pork. There's no reason, except right now there's no public policy that applies it to pork, but I suspect as we go down the road, there will be companies that want to look at what the CI score of their pork is. And how do you lower that CI score? Well, you lower it by lowering the score of the inputs, the corn, the soybean meal, the feed ingredients. You lower it by lowering the energy directly used to raise pork. You lower it by getting efficiency because the same input spread across more pounds of pork lowers the CI score of that pork. So one of the great things of CI score is it's very, very positive to efficiency and to productivity gains. And that's why it's the game changer. And so that's kind of a brief of where we're going, but I think the history or the future for where we're going to be relative to carbon is not in just sequestration programs, of which pork really can't participate. It's really in CI scoring of products, and we can green up almost any product by assessing properly its CI score and then doing the factors we can to lower the CI scores. Public policy can play a role. For fuels, it's playing it with a tax credit. The industry could, the pork marketing group could do it on pork. Public policy could do it on foods and et cetera. Could there be a tax credit for low CI pork? There's no reason there couldn't be. You just got to get legislators to pass it.
So quick follow-up to all that is that, you know, when you're looking at like the 45Z, what do you feel like, if you look in your crystal ball, are the like direct ramifications of credits like that on the pork industry? I think that we're all kind of looking down the road at that as kind of the starting point, but we will be affected from the get-go as they start to administer some of that.
In the very short run, there's probably pluses and negatives. One of the negatives could be is that corn has more value going to an ethanol plant than it does going to a hog, because you've got $1.50 per bushel to work with at an ethanol plant. Obviously, not all spread out at that level back to the farm, because the ethanol plants have to do a lot to lower that score. But it does create, maybe feed could get more expensive. On the other hand, 45Z also applies to renewable fuels on the biodiesel and sustainable aviation side, of which the early fuel for that is probably going to be HEFA-based soybean oil. We are putting up more soybean crushing plants around the country to get soybean oil, which makes soybean meal cheaper. So your corn may get more expensive, but your soybean meal may be cheaper because of the exact same policies. The other may be depending upon how they implement 45Z and to what degree they allow the feedstock calculator to be used, manure may become more valuable, because manure in the feedstock calculator for the CI score of corn, if you use manure on corn ground in that feedstock calculator, it reduces the CI score of corn by about 6 points, 7 points. It varies county to county. Every county gets a different score on that. That's just the way that model works. But manure could become more valuable because it may be included. And that's one of the challenges. We don't know the rules yet. We know how they set the rules for 40B. 40B doesn't use the calculator. 40B set a fixed 10-cent CI score change off sustainable aviation fuel if you do a basket of ag practices. Manure is not in that basket. So it all depends on exactly how these things get set up as to how it's going to directly affect pork.
Yep. Thanks so much for diving into that a little bit. So let's take a step to the side a bit and talk more about the data. So Dr. Crawford and her team at EOCene works directly with National Pork Board and pork producers across the country in really gathering that data and being able to create some of this information for pork producers and help us use it. So Dr. Crawford, could you talk just a little bit about what your team does as far as data collection and how you come up with those beautiful reports for us?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So we started working with National Pork Board as a client in 2018, and it's been great to see how things have progressed and moved along from then till now. And ever since the beginning, it's really been about the producer and keeping them at the center of this. So this is a checkoff funded project that we work on and do the calculations for. And so what we do, we have a data collection list that we talk to the producers about, collect that data. Our team brings that back and puts it into the models or the math equations, and then gets that and very simply put, it's obviously more complicated in the back end, but then puts that into the report and provides it back. And we're booth 661, and my team's here if you guys want to see any of those reports, but really, it's providing the carbon sequestered on that report, looking at soil erosion rates, looking at greenhouse gas emissions, and it's very specific to that property. So we're not looking at the county level, we're not looking at the state, region level. It's specific to each farm and each field within that farm, because we want to make sure that that data and information has much fidelity, so when you do go to use it, whether it's in like a USDA grant program or something else, that we can make sure that you get as much credit as possible, because we know the great work that's being done on pig farms. So that's the easy version of what we do for that.
She made it sound so much easier than it actually is. I promise you that. So follow-up question to that. Why is it important for us as an industry to continue to build a more bolstered data set for pork? I know, so National Pork Board receives aggregate data, so we get our own aggregate report, which I have copies at the back table if anybody's interested, that shows what sustainability looks like for U.S. pork as a whole. So we get that aggregate report because of individual pork producers participating. So while we get it at an anonymous aggregated level, the producer gets their individual report. So how do you feel that it's important, or why do you feel it's important for that to grow?
Yeah, as mentioned, we all know, or you might be first movers. Okay, I've been doing no-till a long time, reduced till cover crops, but maybe didn't measure, right? So what I say is it's important to go ahead and get the report. It's already funded by your checkoff, so there's no additional cost to get the report. It just takes an hour or two of time with my team. And so doing that investment of your time to get that back and make sure you understand your baseline, then start making those improvements. Because if you don't, now you've moved up to here, now your baseline goes with you up to there. Oh, I tried a cover crop, now you're up here. And you lose that additionality potential, as was mentioned before. So that's one important thing, is really understanding what's happening on your own farm and on those fields. And by the way, we can work on the property where the pig farm sits, but also where the manure goes, even if you don't own those acres, because we're looking for the footprint of what your farm is and where that manure goes. Again, to help you understand what it is. So really using it to make sure that the producer themselves understands what's going on. Another reason is, as was mentioned by Jill, so the producer gets your own data, but it's your data. We do not ever share it with National Pork Board, with state pork associations, with any other people. It's really important. What we do, though, is we will aggregate it up to the state level, like she said, or the national level. So Pat McGonigal at Iowa will get a report for Iowa pork saying, for instance, here's the farms that have participated and here's what you can do. So I know then that can be taken to the state house and say, no, this is actually what's happening on pig farms, not necessarily what you're hearing or in any other state. And also the national level, they use that. So if we can get, it's good to have as many farms from as much geographic area as possible to do that. And finally, it helps with the models, these math equations, to have more data in the system. And when you think about it, yep, there's been a lot, but when we think about the history of agriculture and the carbon markets or doing this math, these models, more data in the system also makes every run, every time we do it, even stronger. So those are some base reasons.
Those are all great reasons. So why is there a Ducks girl sitting up here? That's the next question, right? So while I think that it's not fair to talk about carbon markets and where the pork industry sits and what improvements could be made without helping help farmers navigate how to get there. So that is why Pork Board has partnered up and created all these partnerships with different companies like Ducks Unlimited that provides technical assistance and support to help guide farmers in that goal. So while EOC Environmental provides a beautiful report that shows where farmers are, they then also provide a report to show where they can go. But we're not only doing that, we're not providing where they are, where they can go, we're actually gonna help give them tools to get there. So for decades, Ducks Unlimited has been leading the charge in conservation efforts in the United States and Canada. Courtney, could you talk a little bit about the different partnerships that DU has that may seem unlikely, for instance, ducks and the pork industry, and how those different programs are designed to elevate your conservation efforts from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. I think a good place to start, just conceptually, is thinking about kind of where Ducks Unlimited started. We focused on these wetlands, and like we worked with state agencies and different entities to create a wetland. And then fast forward 15 years, and now we're having sedimentation issues in these wetlands. When they first started, they were great at filtering water, filtering all these nutrients out, making better groundwater for communities, having flood control benefits. But after time, the sedimentation builds up, and now we don't have a working wetland. Well, when we go in there and we restore that wetland, what's to say that's not going to happen in another 10 years? And so that's why focusing in the perimeter, like what's happening around these wetlands, what's happening around, our streams and different things, is important. And so taking that approach, our focus was to create a working lands team that would focus on helping producers within those reaches, the rangeland, the cropland, all of these things to help them get to more sustainable practices and helping deter the sedimentation and different things that we were experiencing, like Gulf hypoxia and different things like that. So, we have partnerships like with National Pork Board and others to do cover crops and work with, no-till practices and give recommendations on seeding mixes and things like that, creating native buffers. So there's multiple impacts on those properties while maintaining productive row crop operations and different things. So we're trying to add lift to that concept and making sure that people know that the two can go hand in hand, and we're not here talking about losing profitability, because that's important and that's what keeps people floating, and that's really important. But we do partner with a whole slew of entities, working. We've got a grazing lands team. We've got people working with, the rice growers and all kinds of things. So it's, definitely new territory for some of us, but we are increasingly adding to our team, getting the agronomic experts and different things so we can add that lift to folks like National Pork Board that have, a reach into a community that otherwise maybe some of you in this room wouldn't necessarily talk to the duck people. But, we're trying to bridge that gap, because there is a lot of overlap in what we're trying to do. And even though we have some different missions and different goals here, we can work together and meet all those needs.
Very great. And I mean, it is a unique partnership. And so, something just to highlight, we have different partnerships between Ducks Unlimited, Eocene, Trust in Food, USDA, Nestle, Millborn Seeds, and Farm Credit. So we are really building this great opportunity for pork producers, and we continue to grow that opportunity every day. Okay, David, are you ready? Cover crops, no-till, manure application. Talk to me. And am I going to make any money off carbon?
No, but why would this year be different? I mean, from a sustainability standpoint, there's kind of a hierarchy, but there's also, I'll call it an ease to do things. I've been doing cover crops on all my land down in Lucas and Clark County since 2013. So I'm about 10 years into it. There's good and bad to it. 2017, price of corn was low, price of cover crop seed was high, and I spent a third of my net on cover crops. I mean, that's the reality. I was committed to it, and I spent 1/3 of my net income on cover crops. There was no cover crop program to help and assist at that point in time, etc. So at times it's expensive, or can be. With the other programs that are out there right now, there's assistance through IDALs and through various programs. ADM's got programs. There's a number of programs out there, depending on that are company cooperative type programs. But again, and I think some of these are funded through the CSAs. Some of them are just company specific programs, but there are programs out there for cover crops, and typically $10 to $15 an acre. I try and put my cover crop in for $15 an acre. I've been as high as $40 an acre, and I learned that $40 an acre seed may or may not grow. $15 an acre seed tends to grow. I have used wheat when it was a third of the price of rye, and for what I'm wanting to do on my hills, which is control erosion, it did just as good as rye does. I prefer rye, a little better winter hardiness and some other stuff, but there's other things out there. I have not jumped into trying to get a lot of nitrogen out of my cover crops, but there are those that are being successful, pulling maybe 40, 50 pounds of nitrogen out of their cover crops and pulling that into their mix and using cover crops to reduce nutrient loads, etc. No-till, I've been no-till. I'm going to say I'm not exclusively no-till, because if you get a 4-inch rain on the hills in Lucas County and you get these real erosions, you better correct them or you'll have a 2-foot gully in a year. You've got to do corrective actions. So I'm no-till, but I'm not strict no-till. I use it to try and improve the ground. And figure out those combinations between when do you need to do a little tillage and when, again, no-till's cheaper than tilling. Yeah, it's 1 less pass or 2 less passes across the field. And if I can get, my corn stand looks extremely good this year. My bean stand, I've almost thought maybe I should have done some tillage ahead of the beans. But that's probably a function of the ground being too much rain, the ground just not being in the right condition, and I'm not sure tillage would have helped that anyway. Probably would have just, chunked it up, if you will. So, cover crops, no-till, nutrient management, these are the types of things that the typical farmer can adopt fairly easy. I would be very interested. We've done a little bit of work with, as DIS, with a company that's looking at green ammonia. That has basically would take about 7 points off the CI score of corn, because that's about how much the anhydrous ammonia contributes to corn production. And they think they can price it almost equal to anhydrous. I'd be very interested in adopting green ammonia in corn production technology. And it's one that, again, lowers the CI score. Through tax credits, there's probably mechanisms for it to be rewarded. And even if it costs a little bit more, it may be a net benefit in a public policy arena that farmers could be encouraged to adopt, because again, the great thing about CI score is it is amenable to incentivizing anything that lowers the score for that product. So, yeah, no-till versus conventional till, 7-8 points difference there. Manure makes a difference. The nitrogen management makes a difference. Cover crops make a difference. We ran a scenario looking at the works when we were doing some work with Iowa corn, and we've looked at what if you did cover crops, no-till, 4R or enhanced nitrogen management and manure. And you end up taking the score of corn from about 27 or 28, depending on where you're in the state. And at the county level in Iowa, we range from about 25 to 31 is where Iowa corn ranges. And it takes it basically down to about 0 to -3. So if you do the works, we probably could make corn a net zero CI score commodity. And it's doing things that all of us, I would love to have more hog manure available. I love seeing the green on my hills in Lucas County when you get one of these 3-inch rains in early April. I don't want that ground black. I want it green, and it really makes a difference.
Yeah. So let's stick on the theme of show me the money, right? So Dr. Crawford, we've been working on building more benefits for producers, and one of those new tools is an ROI tool. Can you talk a little bit about the ROI tool and what benefits you see in that for farmers?
Yeah, really exciting. So again, as we started on this journey with National Pork Board and working with pork producers, when we would provide these reports back, a lot of times producers say, help me understand what this even means. What is the greenhouse gas emission? Should this be, yep, it should be lower. What's a good number? How low should it go? If it goes up, is that bad? How much soil erosion is bad? How much is good? And really learning the language of these sustainability words and a lot of what we're talking about today. And so at first in that journey, it was really learning, what are we talking about? And now you're all sitting in this and we're talking, and I think there's a lot of folks keeping along like, oh yeah, because we know these things. So fast forward to now, our team has created a return on investment calculator that's an online platform where we take inputs kind of like he was saying and saying, okay, so first you get your report and you understand what your baseline is. Here's where you start. Then you can put in different practices and different pricing, and if you purchase new capital or equipment to do something, and then put that into the calculator, and it will show you what your return on that investment is over 10 years in dollars per acre. And so that's part of what we heard. So it's really figuring out here you go, here's your information, here's your data, but then the so what, now what do I do? How do I make that decision? And so within our team, because our team is agronomists, animal scientists, environmental scientists that are doing this work, and they're there to help and say, okay, here's next step. Here's what you could do with this. Let's look at your return on this investment and estimate what that could be. And all pork producers have access to that to get a login once you complete your report, and you can toggle that and play and see what could that look like. And we can, even if there are specific, so we do that for the USDA grant program that we're discussing today. That's already in the return on investment calculator. So it puts in that price per acre, or that price per ton that's there, so that gets estimated right in, so you can determine as a producer if this is going to be a good investment for you, or what you can expect over the time of, well, over 10 years in that return. So really, again, taking it from where we started was, here's your report, and people saying, cool, put it on the shelf, or I'll see you next year, to, no, let's make this live, and how do we help people then figure out next steps?
And that is a really cool tool. And I know I have a lot of farmers that are having some wild Friday nights putting numbers into their ROI calculators.
We know how to have a good time. Yeah, exactly.
You all know that you are. So as a pork producer, when I think of technical assistance, the last thing I would think of is working with someone from Ducks Unlimited providing that to me. But through this program, Ducks Unlimited has an entire team of field biologists assisting pork producers just like myself, and they are a brilliant team. Courtney, could you tell me a little bit about what your team looks like, and then what their assistance has looked like for pig farmers?
Yeah, so our team, we've got one gentleman in Minnesota. We've got 3 people assisting in Iowa right now, and then myself in Missouri. And so we have an array of backgrounds. You know, we've got people that have worked on organic farms. We've got people that worked in USDA offices for the last 10 years. We've got a wide variety of folks that have had, farming backgrounds. And the one commonality is that they're here for the people. They're just, here to get it done, and I can't be more proud of the team that we have working with us. We're meeting with producers, so the way that looks is we would meet with a producer and just kind of go over, have a site visit, go over, what are their goals? What are they wanting to accomplish, and trying to, map that out with them. And so if we don't have the expertise, we're going to bring in the people that do. And, and that might be, touching base with somebody that's even in a USDA office, maybe climate smart, maybe not hit the right marks for them. Well, we're going to explore, some of these other opportunities and make sure that we're covering all the bases with them. And so we're mapping out that trajectory and creating a plan with them. And then we're connecting them, with our team, with, working very closely with EOCene to make sure that we're on the right track and helping those producers have the best experience possible in getting to that end goal.
Yeah, so how do you access these brilliant minds and the wild Friday night ROI calculator? It is starting with your Pork Cares Farm Impact Report. So you can find the way to register for that at porkcheckoff.org/sustainability. Well, thanks everybody so much for coming today and enjoying our session here. Thanks to our panelists. Could we give them all a round of applause?